tell me, why are you here?
Because it's my home, because it's my family, because it's where I'm growing, and because I'm loved.
Because I love the Lord and I love Bear Creek. It's a great place to worship.
I'm here because long time ago, this church has reached out, and I really feel they're great with the community, helping others here in the local area as well as abroad. But they've really changed and invested in my life and made me feel loved, and that's what they're going to do for all of you out there. Bring Jesus to you.
I'm here to start my week off right, to fellowship and to be with other people, and just to praise Jesus.
Here for family. We need each other.
Yes, we do need each other.
Because Fair Creek has the best coffee out of every church we visited.
Becky! Becky! Becky, why are you here? Becky!
Oh, I'm ready. Sorry about that, and sorry for those of you who are online this morning. Good to see all of you here this morning. What's up? I hope you are ready for a new series that we've got going, and to get us moving in the right direction, we're going to start today with this series called Refocus. A lot of us, we have times in our lives where it's hard to just kind of get things into focus. Things get blurry, and so we wanted to make it clearer. And so you can't have enough clarity, I don't think, in this world today. So we're going to try to bring some real clarity to who we are as a church, where we're going, and who our leader, what our mission and vision are, what partnership means in this church, how we partner together, all of that. And so today we're going to get started with that. Before we do, though, I think it's a critical thing to do this. A lot of us maybe come in and go out. And if you noticed when you came in today, maybe you didn't notice. And so we want to give you an opportunity for this, all right? So I'm going to actually ask you to stand up. Everybody needs to stand up real quick. Stand up where you are. Okay, good. You guys were all settled and ready. Because once I get up here, you're like, oh, good, I've got at least a few minutes. Anyway, we won't go into how many. And you have time while I'm up here to just kind of get settled and all this good stuff, right? So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to get unsettled. A little later, we're going to be taking communion together. It's part of what we do as a church to remember what Jesus did for us. And so everyone who's a believer, who has trusted in Jesus, you're welcome to join us. And we want you to be a part of that with us. And so it's one of the things that brings unity to the church is when we do this. But you maybe missed it. So here's what I thought would be great. Back in this corner and right back behind there, as the doors you come into this room, we have communion available, all right? And we have elements available for you. So if you didn't get it coming in, you can slip out during this next minute to go do it because I'm going to have everybody doing something, all right? So here's what I'm going to ask you to do during that time. And if you're watching online, here's a great opportunity for you to go get some elements that you might be able to use, maybe a saltine cracker, whatever. And yes, I know it's not the whatever approved thing. Just go get a piece of bread and some wine or juice or whatever you can use at home so that while you're watching, you can actually participate with us too. All right, so here's what I want you to do, though. I want you to turn around and meet about, 2 or 3 people that maybe you don't know. And you don't have to do anything other than, hi, my name is, all right? But you have to give your name too, all right? All right, that's part of it. All right, so you got a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes to do that, whatever. It won't be minutes, all right? So do it quickly. Go across the aisle, all right, if you want to, all right? Let's do that. So go. If you need elements, please go back to the back and get those right now. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, once you're back to your seat, you can sit down, all right? That's great. Hopefully you got a chance to meet some folks and welcome them. Say good morning. Everything. My peeps down here on the front row, I should like giving you high fives, like kind of stuff. When I was up here last, I was getting ready to get in a van after the services that day and head to Daytona Beach, Florida for Inside Out Camp, and that was a high school camp. We had some students that went with us, and we took them down there. It was fantastic. You might say, good grief, how could you not have a good time going to the beach? And it was exactly the truth. And we had a blast, and we had incredible speakers, incredible music and worship. And I got to tell you, I can't wait till next year when we go. And so looking forward to that. But I was getting ready to get into a car to drive for about 13, 14, and on the way home was 18 hours of just, you know what that's like, being in a car that long and getting used to each other. I was put in the car driving the van for all of the girls. And so that tell you anything. That's the reason why I haven't been up here for 2 weeks. I had to go to therapy. So, not really. It was fun. We had a really great time. I didn't realize how many times you have to stop on trips like that. For me, I'm like hit the pedal to the metal and go until you get there, and we didn't do that. So I have, and I already knew this because of my family, basically because of my wife, but I got introduced again at a whole new level of what Buc-ee's is. And if you don't know how many of you know what Buc-ee's is? Yeah. See, why is it that I can ask you about a Bible verse and you go, and when I say Buc-ee's, everybody's, whoa, yeah, brisket on the board. Everybody's excited about it, right? Well, I can tell you, that's why I'm wearing this shirt today. Inside Out made a real impact. And I'm hoping that that's one of the reasons why we have high school students coming, is because we are looking to make an environment for them, but not just the environment for them, but for every person that would come through the doors of our church. We want it to be an irresistible environment so that for us, we can not only celebrate who Jesus is, but introduce him to a lot of new people. And so that's an important part of who we are. We know life's complicated, all right? It's true. Life is complicated. You want to get it right, and we want to help. And that's really the whole point of why we do some of the things we do around here. But we're going to be emphasizing that and refocusing in to make sure we got an understanding, clarity. We want to be clear about who we are, all right? So I want to ask you the question that Kelly asked everybody else. Why are you here? What brings you to Fair Creek Church? And it may be that it's something that you've really found a place. You're still examining it. You're still wondering. You're trying to figure out what this place is all about. And so we're going to try over the next 4 weeks, beginning today, we're going to work through a process to just bring clarity about who we are as a church. And you might say, oh, well, I already know all of this. This will be a great month to take off and go somewhere. No, please don't. Matter of fact, we have some things that we want to make sure we all understand and why the church exists in the first place. We could go back and give a lot of history of this church. You maybe didn't know, but it started in 1928 in downtown Dayton as Christian Tabernacle. It started as a result of an evangelistic crusade that was happening in downtown Dayton, and there was enough people in the area that came to know Jesus that they decided to start a church, and that's how it began. They started in a small storefront, then moved to another building, then finally went to Best Street, which is still, that building is still standing in downtown Dayton. It's another church is using it now. And then we moved out here back in the late, I say late, it was really the early 90s, and really started moving in a direction, renamed the church for the two communities we kind of are split between, Beaver Creek and Fairborn, and we came up with Fair Creek Church. Now, I wasn't a part of all of those things. I didn't come here until around 2001, and really got involved and became a part of the staff and all that stuff. So yeah, I've been here a long time, long enough to be part of the furniture, if you will. And one of the things that I have noticed about this church is that from time to time, we always need clarity. It's true, because with everything going on in our lives, so many distractions, difficulties and problems in the world, all of that, we have to kind of home in on the things that we're about and who we really are. And so that's why I'm asking you the question, why are you here? Why are you here? Because over the next couple of weeks, we're really going to going to encourage you how you can actually feel like you're more here than you've ever been. And so it kind of brings me to this question. And this is the question I want to answer today, and I want us to really think about. And we will conclude with what I believe is really the strongest answer we could come up with. And I'd love to hear feedback, because we will post these things on social media after this today, and want to hear your feedback of what you think about this. What will make us the strongest local church we can be? Now, we can talk about the church, the large group of the universal church, the church that's worldwide, all the local churches that are meeting in the Dayton area and spread all over the world that are meeting today or sometime through the week. Some of them will meet publicly so everyone can see, and some will meet in private so that they can actually have time together to build their faith because of the persecution that they're under right now. So think of it from this perspective. We are one of many local churches. But if we're going to be a local church, then we have to be the most focused that we can be. And we have to make sure that we have a clarity of what we're supposed to be about. Why are we here? Why do you show up? Why do you come? Why do you participate? Well, each week we're going to take, I believe, what are the 4 things that are really critical to our local church, Fair Creek. And we're going to speak specifically about the things that are Fair Creek Church. And so I want to take you to this list of what we're going to talk about. And the first one we'll talk about even today will be this, the leader. Now, this is not a time for me to talk about me. Yes, I am one of many leaders in this church. But I am not the leader. The leader of this local church, and should be of any local church, should be Jesus Christ. He's the one that we look to as setting the principle by which we do everything. We don't do anything unless it's according to his teachings. We try to follow the example of how he treated other people and how he brought his message of hope to the world. We won't want to do anything without him supplying not only the plan, but also the power behind it. We know that when he went back to heaven, he gave us his Holy Spirit to live in our lives and to be evident, moving about in all that we do and say. And so if that's the case, then that's got to be clear that our leader is who? Jesus. All right? Don't forget that. Don't forget that. And please understand, every local church needs leaders who actually become the hands and feet of Jesus in the middle of a local church. So yes, we have pastors and staff and directors, and we also have elders who are a part of, that represent and are a part of the congregation or the church body. And we have leaders of ministries that happen throughout, ones that lead small groups. There are leaders right now that are teaching students and children. So there are leaders all over the place in this church. But there's one leader that we all have in common, that we follow, the one that has set the pace, and that's Jesus himself. Then, from there, we look at Scripture, and we have written a specific kind of mission. The mission is probably the thing that stands out, because the mission is actually what we are, who we are, where we're going, what we're going to try to accomplish. And for us, we make a statement like this, that we're here to lead people. We want to lead people, bring them along, help them take their next steps, lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. No matter where they are on the spectrum, no matter where they are on the life cycle of their situation or their existence, we want to make sure we're giving them an opportunity to come along and to understand the mission of the church, to have that growing relationship with Jesus. I want you to first just think in your own heart and mind right now, okay? No matter who you are, what age you are, it doesn't matter. Are you growing in your relationship with Jesus, our leader? Are you personally doing that? And we want to talk about how those things occur in this church. How do you grow? How can you grow? And we want to define that and make it as clear as possible so there's no ambiguity about how you grow. But then on top of that, we have a vision. It's necessary. Without vision, people perish. And if that's the case, we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to make the vision as clear as possible. And the vision that God has given us and has for several years now has been the idea that we want to be a place that is people for real people. That's kind of a slogan statement or whatever. You'll see it written in the foyer. But it goes back to this concept that we want to be a church that's open, with open doors, that when people come in, they feel like they belong. And giving them an opportunity to belong before they even believe. See, many times churches get so impressed on themselves of how great they are, they forget the people who need to be introduced to Jesus. And so we're doing everything we can to be a church for unchurched people. People who don't have a connection to church. And you know who's key in that? All of us. Inviting them, the people we know and work with and go to school with, and the people that we interact with from our family and around in our neighborhoods. Those are the people that we want to introduce to Jesus, because that's really what he asks us to do. So we're doing everything we can to make this environment, who we are as Fair Creek Church, to be a place where anybody could walk through the doors and feel like they belong. And they can ask the questions they need to ask to grow in a relationship with Jesus. Then, the last thing is this. There's partnership. The partnership, and I mean, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about each one of us together, coming together as individuals from our different backgrounds, you know. I could ask a lot of you, what kind of church did you grow up in? Some of you didn't grow up in church. Some of you were introduced to Jesus as a friend brought you, and you got introduced later in life, or maybe in a time in your life when you were in need or in crisis, and you met him there. Some of you grew up in church. Your mom and dad took you, your grandparents took you, somebody got you there, and you learned all the stories and all the things about it. But one of the things that's critical is that when we come in together, we have to have and depend on our leader, Jesus, to actually give us the unity that helps us go along. Because in our world today, have you noticed that there's division? Okay, everybody just take a sigh and a relief. Okay, yeah. There's division everywhere you go, all right? Everywhere you go, there's division. And it doesn't matter whether it's about us personally and what we think, or our own personal ideas, or the conveniences of life, or the things that we like to see done, methods or even traditions that we've grown up with. We tend to think that those things are the most important, and then we let them divide us. Well, when we come here as Fair Creek Church, we want it to be more of a partnership. In many churches, and in this one including, we had this thing called membership. How many of you have ever heard of church membership? Raise your hand. Okay, sure, a lot of you. Some of you are members of this church, but you haven't heard about it recently. Why? Because we've been under a time of study. The staff, the pastors, the elders, we've been studying what that really means and what would do it to make us the strongest local church possible. And so you're going to be hearing more and more about this word partnership. When I think of partnership, I think of like linking arms, with somebody. When I think of membership, I feel like I'm paying dues and I get a bunch of stuff for it, okay? Well, that shouldn't describe a local church, all right? We're not here to provide the best, things for you, and it makes us all of us, consumers, rather than contributors, partners. So that's going to be a very important part of this. You actually are going to receive something in the mail to talk about all 4 of these things. So I want everybody to be watching, yes, snail mail, all right? It's a thing where people come to your, and there's a little box out in front of your house, the thing that weeds are growing up all over and everything that you don't use anymore because you use email, all right? But most of you don't read your email anyway, so please make sure you go to the mailbox, all right? That will help us so that we can explain this in full. Then, in a couple weeks, you're going to hear about this as a part of that, and you're going to see it on social media and in the email, in the know, and all of that. Then we're going to have some times together to pray. We're going to have some times together where we're going to actually get together and let us dream together and talk about the future. Because there's a lot of things that have happened and occurred to us as a church since COVID. And so we've watched a lot of shifting and changing and everything that's gone on, and we're trying to make sure that we're out in front and following what our leader tells us to do. So I'm excited about all of those opportunities. One of the things that, if we were to go back and start talking about our leader, we have to hear what he had to say about the church. And so I want to take you to Matthew chapter 16, and I want to show you this. They were actually, the disciples were with Jesus, and they were going through, and Matthew captures this part of the story. They're going into Caesarea Philippi. They're looking at this. And this was kind of a metropolitan area where a lot of people and a lot of news and a lot of gossip and things were hitting the streets, and a lot of rumors, especially about Jesus, because of all the things that he had been doing. And so this is what happens. He gets there and he's with Peter, one of his closest disciples, one that was a leader for everybody to see. This is what he said. He said this to Peter. A lot of people are saying and asking who I am. He asked Peter that. And who do you think the people say I am? Well, they say you're a teacher, you're this, you're that. He said, but I want to know about you, Peter. So he starts out here in verse 15 and says, but what about you? He asked. Who do you say I am? This was Jesus' plan all along, was to bring every person, you and I included, to a point of asking us this question. And so the question, I'll bring it to this point, and I'll say, but what about you? All right, this is Jesus' question to every one of us. And I would say this, some of you have been attending this church for a long time, you maybe been a part of it, but maybe you're still questioning whether or not you have a faith or a belief in Jesus to the point you have a relationship with him. I'm going to tell you that even today would be the best day in the world. If you know that you need to trust Jesus Christ, then today would be the day. You see, he died for you to pay the debt of your sin, and you couldn't pay it yourself. He went to the cross, and his death on the cross, because he was God in the flesh when he came, he took on the penalty we deserved, and he died for it and paid for it in full. And all we have to do is receive that into our life. The greatest thing about it is he didn't stay dead. He rose from the dead. And by doing that, that gives us the opportunity to enter into a relationship that's for eternity. It gives us a new life to live here and an eternal life to live with him. So when you think about it from that perspective, I want to ask you, what about you? Have you come to that place where you have trusted in Jesus Christ? It's an important part. I'm going to give you an opportunity a little later in the service when we're actually celebrating communion, that if you've never ever trusted Jesus, you've ever come into a relationship with him, that you can actually pray right where you are, have a little quiet time with him, and he'll be ready to hear what you have to say. So I go back to the passage of Scripture, and it says here, and Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. He clearly knew who he was. The Messiah, meaning he was the leader that the Jews were looking for. The Jewish nation was looking for the Messiah to come, and Peter believed him to be that one. But also the Son of the living God, meaning that he truly was God in the flesh. He was the one to come and do this. So Jesus replied to him in the next verse, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood. In other words, somebody didn't come up and fill you in on all this. You know, it wasn't somebody who just came up and said, look, Peter, Jesus, he's the Messiah, the Son of the living God. It wasn't by somebody telling them. It was something that God put on his heart, but by my Father in heaven. God the Father had spoken to Peter and helped him understand that Jesus was the Messiah, just like he does in our hearts. When we come to that point to believe in Jesus, God enables us to have the faith, because many of us don't have much faith. We have a hard time believing in something we can't see or tangibly feel. And God wants us each to be able to experience him. So he gives us faith so that we can believe it. He'll strengthen it enough. All you need is the faith of a mustard seed. All you got to have is just a little bit of faith to believe that this is true, and God will enable you to see it, just like he did Peter. But then the verses go on, and I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock. Now, the name Peter means Petra. It means the idea of a rock, that he would be a rock in the church. But if you see the way that it was written, the fact that Jesus was the Messiah, the Son of the living God, that's the rock he's speaking of. And on this rock of Jesus, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. In other words, all of the authority that hell can muster, all right? All of the authority that hell and the devil and he tries to have in the world, and to try to own everything and to try to direct us and move us in his path and not God's path. does everything he can to tear down the image of God in every human that God created us. And it says this, look, I will build my church. First time you've seen this word church, ecclesia, it's the first time you saw this gathering of people. Because up to this point, the light of the world was really the nation of Israel. They were the ones that were showing and proclaiming who God was. And at this point, they had lost their way so many times. And Jesus comes on the scene and he says, I'm doing a new thing, something different, something that's going to change the world. And it's going to be the church, this gathering of people who would believe in him as the Son of the living God, the one who would die for them and be risen from the dead. And it won't be, there is nothing, all right? This is the strongest authority below God, is the gates of hell. All right, the leadership of hell and everything that hell stands for. All of evil can try to come against this, but nothing can overthrow God in that process. And he says, I'm going to build my church, and not even that authority is going to come in against it. So I got to tell you something. If you're wavering on whether the church is worth it, and trust me, I know this, there's been a lot of things that would tell me that believing the church is worth your investment, your time, and everything. Over the last few years, I can see why some people, anybody, could have a just reason to walk away from the church because of the confusion, because of the division, because of some of the abuse that's gone on. It's real. It's happened. All of that, though, is human influence. It's because the gates of hell came against those and people gave in to that authority rather than listening to the leader, Jesus. And so when we see this build, he's going to build his church, I got to tell you, go back in history and think about it. I wrote it down this way. The church has survived and thrived even though it has been the target of annihilation from the beginning. I mean, from the beginning, people were trying to get rid of the church. Anything that the church stood for, anything that, especially the idea of Jesus being the resurrected Lord. That's what most people gave their life for. They didn't give their life for the worship style or the coffee, all right? Didn't give it for the air conditioning to be on in the building that's when the heat outside is crazy. Had nothing to do with that, okay? Had nothing to do with those conveniences or the things that we think of maybe when you think of church. It wasn't for programming that we do, and none of that. It's for the leader and who the leader was. People gave their life, and they still are giving their life to this day. So there has been this target on the back of the church for so long to annihilate it and to wipe it out. But even the gates of hell, the authority of hell, anything that evil and the devil could throw at us, it's not going to happen because Jesus is the one who's the leader and built this church. Now, I read this in a blog, and this is from Alyssa Lee. She said this, the local church is powerful for many reasons, but the key element which sets it apart and empowers the church is that it was formed by God and not by human invention. Many of the problems and issues we have with the church has nothing to do with how Jesus and God put it together. It has to do with how people got involved and ruined it. Okay? Giggle, something. All I hear is crickets. Say, amen. I don't care. Okay? It's true. Many of us, we continue to put our faith and hope in things that were human invention in the church rather than what God has placed as important. And so we forget and we don't remember. If you're questioning, like I said, being a part of investing in the local church, your time, your effort, your life, your resources, whatever, all of those things, is it worth it? Let me just tell you something. This is the greatest organization and institution to be a part of. Why? Because God created it and Jesus leads it. And so we can't keep our eyes on ourselves or what we want or any of the things like that. We have to be willing to give it up for Him. So it's critical. I want to show you this. This comes from 1 Peter, and we just talked about this, but why it's so important to think about the fact that Jesus is the leader of the church, but yet we are part of that church and how He's building that church and how we have to keep our eyes on the leader and not on ourselves. Let me show you this. It comes in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. We actually just went through 1 Peter, so you may remember this, all right? As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by humans, but chosen by God and precious to him, this living stone that he's talking about, who do you think that is? Jesus, that's right. This is Jesus he's speaking of. This living stone, this one that's the cornerstone where it all started. He was the one where you start with the cornerstone and then you begin to build the walls from there. It gives you that amount. Back in the day when this was spoken of, the cornerstone was so critical because that's what the engineers of the day used to place it in place. And it's similar today, just a lot more complicated because we know so much more. But back then when they build a building, they put the stone in place. And Jesus is the one that's in place. If Jesus is not at the center of the church should not even exist. Many churches exist without Jesus. I would not call them a church. I would not call them an ecclesia, a group of people gathering together to worship and exalt Jesus. I would call them a great social club, all right, or a community organization, okay? But many of them have lost sight of who the cornerstone is, the living stone. But then it goes on and it actually includes us. He includes us in it. He says, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. So, I don't know if you've ever thought of yourselves as priests, but priests are the ones who actually do the work of the leader of the church. And we're this holy priesthood, one to represent the living stone, and we are these small living stones. We're the ones that we show that through our life, our example, wherever we go, whatever we do. This is what keeps us on track, because if we are doing this, it makes it a spiritual house. So when people come here, when people come into this room and we gather on Sunday mornings, it happens many other times. Small groups meet, community groups meet in people's homes. They meet here in this building, all over the community. There are small groups that are meeting this morning in Kid Street. There will be small groups that are meeting tonight with student ministry. I mean, think about this, all of this. The only thing that makes us spiritual is who the leader truly is, because we're following his guidance, his principles, his values. And it makes it acceptable. These spiritual sacrifices means that it's worth our investment. It's worth our investment of time and money and actually our abilities and giving everything we have, our hearts, to this effort. Why? Because it's the one thing God built. It's the one thing that Jesus put his influence in. And he gave us the responsibility of then to represent who he is to the world. So we don't want to miss this. Let me take you to this statement, and this is an important one. Jesus is the hope our world needs, and the church is how he reveals that hope. That's who we are. We're the revealers of that hope. Jesus is the hope. We're not the hope. Our programs are not the hope. But Jesus is the hope that we offer. And we do it by organizing different things that we do to come together. But the hub of everything, the message of everything is of our leader, Jesus. And with Jesus as the Lord, and if we can move that, with Jesus as the leader of the church, our mission, vision, and partnership together is unstoppable. I don't know if you ever thought about being part of something that's unstoppable. But with the plan that I see and the way Jesus set up the church, if the church is allowing him to be the leader, then there shouldn't be anything that stops us. I think a lot of times our own fears, our own ideas, even our traditions, our conveniences, our personal preferences, all of those things start to be more important than following what the leader asks of us. What we want out of church rather than what he wants for us as a church. And so it's critical that we remember that if he's the leader and we're following him for the mission and vision of this church and pulling together as partners in this church, then it makes us unstoppable to accomplish those things that he's put in front of us. I want to take you to Ephesians chapter 4, and I want to just read this to you because this is the foundation. Paul was writing to this church, and we've heard Jesus speak of the fact that he was going to build his church and nothing would come against it. Nothing could come against it. And then we see this incredible statement that we went through in 1 Peter, that Jesus is the cornerstone, the one that's right at the center, and that we represent that by being what builds the church, the living stones, and representing that to the world. And then, on top of that, we go to Ephesians where Paul describes something about the church that should be for the universal church, which is so difficult in the day we live in. But it should be for the universal church, all the churches together, but it has to be represented in the local church, which is Fair Creek right here. This has to be represented in us. So Ephesians 4:1, and Paul writes this as a prisoner, all right? He's already gone through unbelievable torture and jail time because of his faith in Jesus. He says, as a prisoner for the Lord then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Every one of us in this room that are followers of Jesus, you placed your faith in Jesus. Our calling is to represent him and to live and to follow his practices and to live them out to the other people that are around us. So it's incredibly important. But then he goes on and it says, be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. This is what should be the description of Fair Creek Church. This should be a description that we are humble and gentle. We're patient with each other. We're bearing with one another because we love each other. Why do we love each other? Because Jesus first loved us. And we make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit. If we're listening, honestly, submitting ourselves and being humble and letting God be the one to speak to us, his Holy Spirit will pull us together. He'll pull us together to where we're going to have such a sense of peace and unity that there's nothing that could stop us because we have the right power behind us. I want to take you to the rest of the verse, and this is what it says. This is important, and I want everybody to see this. Could you read this with me? Because this is important. Read it out loud so I can hear you, okay? There is one body and one Spirit, just as you were called to one hope when you were called. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. There's not multiple ways to God. There's one, Jesus. And through him, he unites us together. There's not multiple things that we have to figure out. There's not multiple faiths to have. There's one faith. There's not multiple baptisms. There's one baptism. There's not multiple lords. There's not multiple leaders. There's not multiple spirits. There's one of each of those. All of those things important that we have one in mind. That's what brings us together to be one through all and in all. Let me just take you to this statement. I said it at the beginning. What makes the local church, what makes Fair Creek the strongest local church it could be? The local church is strongest when we partner together to follow our leader. And who is it? He's the one. He's the one. So today we're going to take time together to remember what made him the leader of us all. When he stepped out and he laid his life down. No other leader does this where they actually take on the responsibility of everyone else's faults and problems and actually lays their life on the line. And that's what he did. And he told us, remember this. When you do it, remember it because that's what's going to make us strong together. Is when we remember it together. It's what brings us to unity. It makes us examine who we are. We ask the question, But who do you say I am? What about you? Do you say Jesus is your leader in your life? Is he the leader of the things that go on in your everyday life? Is he a part of your everyday faith that you are experiencing day in and day out? Is he a part, and hopefully we would say, is he at the center of your life, but also the center of this church? And as you represent that relationship you have and growing in that relationship with him, and we see the mission accomplished in your very life, we see it then accomplished in the church life. Take a look at this one more time. We're strongest when we partner together to follow our leader, Jesus. Today we're going to remember what he did. This is something to help us come to that point. And actually, we should examine ourselves, every one of us. If you've never trusted Jesus Christ today, this moment would be the time. I'm going to give you a moment to pray and to pray silently where you are and to thank Jesus for what he's done in your life. And if you've never trusted him, just reach out and say, God, I don't want to go my way anymore. I want to turn from my way and go your way. I believe that you died for my sin, and I'm receiving that into my life. And I believe that Jesus died and rose again for me. If you can tell him that's what your faith is in, then you then have a new relationship with him. I encourage you to do that today. And then you then can take communion with us because you'll be remembering what Jesus has done. And if you know him, if you're a believer here today, then renew this. Refocus your life on what Jesus has done for you. It's what makes everything we do as a local church worth it. It's what brings value to it. Is our leader laying his life down for us. So take a moment right where you are and just quietly pray and thank him for that. Or maybe reach out to trust him in your life.